Welcome to second session on process synchronization. Till now what we have seen is process types. We have seen that process could be competing processes or could be a non-competing. Then we had seen various types of resources which a system would have. So resources broadly can be classified as a shareable resource or a non-shareable resource. For an example, read-only file is a shareable resource and printer is a non-shareable resource. Then we talked about various issues pertaining to the process synchronization. So essentially we had seen that there are three main issues which one encounters, which one needs a solution for. They are mutual exclusion, wherever we have a non-shareable resource and these resources are needed to be shared, then these resources are to be shared in a mutually exclusive manner. And we have seen that whenever processes are going to be competing, then starvation may occur, meaning to say some of the process never get the resources, so they would starve for the resource. And then we had also seen something about deadlocks, that two processes could wait endlessly for each other to release the resources which they are holding. So these are the three main problems. We will try to then we had seen various we had discussed various approaches to handle the process synchronization, and one of the approach, that is a software approach for handling the process synchronization, has been discussed in a previous session. And we could realize that creating a software approach which is primarily the responsibility of a user to develop the solution is not very easy. We saw example for two processes, so how difficult it was, and then if same concept has to be extended to a large set of processes, then it becomes a further more difficult. So in today's session we would be looking at some of the other approaches that are used for process synchronization. So one of the approach which is proposed and at times could be used is hardware based approach. So we will just try to see that what the hardware based approach is and how it functions. So let us look at that how the mutual exclusion using a hardware based approach can be achieved. So we find that the process mutual exclusion gets violated primarily for the fact that processes they interleave in time. That is the processes while executing can get suspended and another process can take. So and one important reason that why the interleaving occurs, interleaving mainly occurs due to hardware interrupts, hardware/software interrupts, or at times when process makes a system call for accessing the devices, then also the process could get suspended and interleaving can occur. So we find that because of a interrupts or a system call, running process gets suspended and another process starts running, and which essentially leads to a interleaved code execution. And we find that interleaving of a processes is main cause due to which the mutual exclusion is required. If two processes are not interleaved in time, they execute sequentially, then we know that there would be no problem, because all the resources required by one process will always be available to that particular process. So how do we prevent the interleaving? So for preventing the interleaving, one of the approach which can be adopted in case of a uniprocessor system is that we remove the basic cause of a interleaving, that is interrupt. So somehow we find out a mechanism of disabling the interrupt. and we find that any microprocessor, if we talk about, they would have instructions which are executing which can disable the interrupt, or they would have instructions which will enable the interrupt. So here is a very simple case that if a critical section is to be performed, an operation to be performed in a mutually exclusive manner, then what we can do, we can disable the interrupts. So once the interrupt is disabled, then when the process starts executing, it cannot be interrupted. So after disabling the interrupt, the process can start executing, critical section will get executed, and once the critical section get executed, the code can use for enabling the interrupt. So one can enable the interrupt. Now once the interrupt is enabled, after this, if the process needs to be suspended, it can be suspended. But please note that once the disable interrupt instruction is executed, till the time enable interrupt instruction is executed again, in between the process cannot be terminated. This essentially means that the interleaving is completely avoided. So we find that very simple, with the help of a very simple instruction, just by disabling and enabling the interrupt, the interleaving can be prevented. Consequently, the mutual exclusion can be achieved. So this is a mechanism which one can this is a mechanism supported from the hardware side, but we'll see that this approach is not going to be applicable for most of the cases. There are issues which we'll try to see that what those issues are. Predominantly the issues are that inside the system there are many important functions which are performed which are needed to be performed in a timely manner, and if interrupts are disabled, then in that case the performance of overall system could degrade. For an example, if we just try to see that, let us say that real-time clock inside a machine is maintained with the help of some kind of a interrupt. So in case we disable the interrupt, then we know that our second counter, millisecond counter or minute counter is not going to be incremented because the interrupt would not occur. Interrupt is completely disabled. So my real-time clock can completely go wrong. So that is a one kind of problem we can easily see that can occur. The second problem is that this particular approach is mostly suited with a uniprocessor, suited for a uniprocessor system. The case is that there is a single processor which is executing. So whenever the program starts executing, it disables the interrupt. But let us assume that the case where we have a multiple processor and there are different codes which are executing on a different processors. So as a consequence, now what happens that if the interrupt is generated on a one processor, the other interrupt is disabled on the one processor, the same has to be done for all other processor, and we find that this is going to be a really very costly operations. So that's the reason that we find that hardware approaches for enabling and disabling of the interrupt in general is not well suited for achieving the mutual exclusion. We find that so we figured that simple instruction like enable disable interrupts cannot be used. So it was thought that why not design certain machine instructions which can facilitate the mutual exclusion. So if we refer back refer back to our example of a software solution, we found that entry into the critical section usually required the eligibility check, whether the particular process which is making an attempt to enter inside a critical section is eligible to enter at that point of time or not, and if it is eligible, then it is allowed to perform the operation. If it is not, then it is not allowed to perform it is not allowed to get inside the critical section. So the eligibility check, if we find eligibility check, a very simple case which we have seen earlier, that what was done, that a process 0, when it tries to enter the critical section, it marks its own flag equals to true, and then goes on to check the status of the flag of the other process. If the status of other process flag is false, then it goes on to executing the critical section. So we can very clearly see here that it is a two-step process. The step is a setting of making it involves the setting of a flag and checking the condition. So these are the two steps which are required to be performed, and whenever a case occurs where let us say a particular process is able to set the flag, and then another process gets its chance and it is able to set its own flag, we find that both of them. So for an example, the process 0 comes and it sets its flag equals to true, and process 1 also comes and sets its flag equals to true. So because of interleaving, now what has happened, both the processes, they have set their flag equals to true, and when they check theirs, we find that they get into a deadlock condition. So we can see that this is what is going to happen, because there are two distinct operations. The operation 1 is a setting of a flag, and operation 2 is a checking of a flag. So it was thought that if suppose we have an instruction which can set and check the flag in an atomic manner, then the problem of a mutual exclusion can be resolved. We will try to see that what does it mean to say executing something in an atomic manner, and how does it helps in solving the problem of a mutual exclusion. So let us consider an instruction. You can think this instruction as a assembly instruction. So let us say that we have a test and a set instruction. So we are trying to indicate the test and set instruction as a form of a function here, but actually this kind of instruction is implemented inside a machine as a assembly instruction, and it could execute in a single cycle. So a very simple structure here, we are saying that we have a test set as a function, and its output is a boolean, that is a true or false, and it takes input as a integer variable. I is a argument which it takes as a input. So the function takes integer as a input. Depending on the value of an integer given, it changes the value of a test set, that is it makes it a test set equals to false or a test set equals to true. So let us see that how it does. So it begins something like this. It checks if the argument variable I equals to 0, then what happens, that then it goes and changes the value of I equals to 1 and marks the test set equals to true. So a function, it is something like a function comes, it checks a flag. If it is 0, then what it does, it goes and modifies the flag equals to 1, and it also modifies the function output value to make it true. So that is how it is going to be doing. So, and if the condition is not true, that is I is not equal to not equal to 0, then in that case what it does, it makes a test set equals to false. So we will see that this simple instruction which is executed in a atomic manner, meaning to say completely it executes, it doesn't breaks, like it cannot be interrupted, as we know that if we consider the example of assembly instruction, the way assembly instruction gets executed, it executes completely or it doesn't execute completely. For an example, if you take a instruction Intel x86 assembly instruction, that is add AX comma BX. So what it does, it adds the content of AX with BX and it stores the result back into the AX register, and we know that this entire thing is performed in a single instruction cycle. Though there are two steps, that is adding AX and BX and then is storing the result into a AX. So but entire instruction is executed simultaneously. So let us look at an example. Let us take an example and see that how the mutual exclusion can be achieved with the help of a test set instruction. So here we take an example. So we define a variable named as a lock, and in the beginning lock is initialized, that is initialized to 0, meaning to say lock is open. So a process can execute something when the lock is open. It is given the lock, right? So we define the lock which is initialized to 0, and then this is a function in which critical section is going to be executed. So we are saying that repeat nothing until test set lock. That is, you don't do anything. The repeat nothing essentially means that you are not doing anything. When you are executing here, you are sort of executing a delay loop, not actually executing any useful code until the test set lock becomes true. So in the beginning, if we assume that test set lock is equal to, if we assume that lock is false, then it will check that if test set lock is false. So we find test set lock is false, and therefore what happens, that we will continue to execute. We will be executing this instruction continuously. As soon as the lock becomes, as soon as test set lock results into a true true condition, it will terminate and it will come and start executing the critical section. And after having executed the critical section, once again what we can do, we can mark the lock equals to 0. That is, making the lock equals to 0 essentially means that you are trying to allow the other processes to use the lock for accessing the critical section. So a process can access the critical section only when the lock value is 0, and once the lock value is 0, it can acquire the lock and get into the critical section. So we can very clearly see that if we have such kind of instructions available to us, this will allow us to implement the mutual exclusion in a very easy manner, and we can also realize that we can use any number of variables, large number of variables for guarding the various critical sections. So the advantage of using a machine instruction approach, or the property of such instruction approach, is that we clearly see that it is applicable to any number of processes. The solution is not restricted to a 2-process solution, and as I said, that we can use the multiple variables to support the multiple critical section, and each critical section can be defined by individual set of variables. We find that in the critical section there is something which we call as a WYSIWYG weighting. Let me just explain that what busy waiting is. So, here is a condition, we are saying repeat and nothing, meaning repeat nothing until test set lock, that is until the test set lock becomes true, repeat this. So, repeat. So, here let us assume that we have an instruction which is a say no operation instruction. So, what we are doing, we can very clearly see that the process, when it is given its chance, what it does, it wastes the CPU cycle, CPU cycle executing this instruction. So, such a thing is that the process is busy, process is executing, process is not idle. When it gets the CPU, it is not idle, but it is not producing any useful work. So, such a scenario we call as a process to be busy waiting process. And we should understand that whenever a busy waiting is employed, it wastes the CPU cycles. With machine instructions, it is always possible that starvation and deadlock may occur. So, we have seen an approach which is which was essentially a hardware based approach. Now, there is another approach which we call as a OS approach, and we will try to see that how what kind of OS support is provided for the purpose of process synchronization. So, one of the simplest thing which OS support is known as a semaphores, and we can visualize the semaphores as an integer variable, where primarily 3 operations on these variables are defined. These semaphore variables can be initialized to non-negative value, that is, it can be initialized to value 0 or positive values. There is a operation which can be performed on this. We call it as a wait operation. So, we can wait on a semaphore variable. So, when we do a wait on a semaphore variable, and if wait is essentially a decrement operation. So, whenever wait on a semaphore variable is performed, the semaphore variable is decremented and the value of a semaphore variable is checked. If post decrement, if the value becomes negative, then the executing process, the process which had executed the wait instruction, is blocked, or to say that it is suspended. So, that is one operation. Similarly, the another operation, that is a increment operation, or known as a signal operation, is performed on a semaphore variable. And what essentially this operation does, that if the value is not positive, then a process blocked by then what it does, that it increments the semaphore variable, and it unblocks a waiting process which was waiting for condition to become available. So, it unblocks a process. So, these are so semaphores, as we said, that there are 2 operations defined, and there are mainly three things which can be done with the semaphore. One is it can be initialized, another is it can be decremented, and third is it can be incremented. And other than these 3 operations, there is no way to inspect or manipulate the semaphore variable. Meaning to say, I cannot check a semaphore variable something like this. If suppose we have a semaphore variable named S, I cannot say that if S equals to 0. I would need to check the variables with the help of the only operation which is available is wait signal or assignment operation. Let us look at let us take a very simple example and see that how the mutual exclusion is implemented. So, here in this case, we are saying that we have S and we have a data type. Let us assume data type. Later on we will see that what the semaphore structure could look like. So, to begin with, let us assume that semaphore is a data type. So, we declaring a semaphore variable S, and which in the beginning I am saying is initialized to 0. So, it is initialized to 1. So, let us say that some process comes which executes the instruction wait s. So, when the wait s is done, so s in the beginning is 1. So, now when you execute the wait s, the value of s will become 0. It will get decremented, and since it is a non-negative value, what process does? Process is allowed to execute the critical section. So, it will execute the critical section, meaning to say it will access the resource which is to be accessed in a mutually exclusive manner, and having accessed the resource in a mutually exclusive manner, once its activity is over, once the required critical section activity is over, the process will come and do a signal operation. So, signal, as we have said, that signal will simply increment the value. So, now s will become s. When this process came, it had become 0. Now, when you do a signal will increment, and once again it will become this value will become 1. So, this is the way we can very clearly see that the process can be executed in a mutually exclusive manner. Now, let us just analyze this particular process. Let us see that how the mutual exclusion is actually achieved here. So, I am saying that the wait operation, when wait s executes, it will decrement the value of s equals to 0. So, let us assume that process P0 comes and it executes the wait s. So, now the value for the process 1 after this instruction has become equals to 0, and since the value of s is non-negative, it is allowed to enter into the critical section. Now, let us assume that while this process was executing in a critical section, it got suspended, and it can get suspended actually for many reasons. One of the simplest reason is that its time quantum expires, so it gets suspended. So, let us assume that the second process comes, and second process also executes the wait s, because it also wants to access the critical section. So, when now it will execute the wait s, the value of s was 0, now it will become -1, and as a consequence, since the value of s is negative, now the second process will get blocked. So, we can very clearly see that at any given point of a time, only one of the process will be allowed to access the critical section. Let us look the same example. What I was trying to say here is let us see that the implementation, that if we have two processes, process P0 and process P1, and we want them to execute in a certain order, then how do we formulate the solution? So, in this case, what we are saying is that we have say two semaphore variables. The one is a S, another is a R semaphore variable, and in this particular example, what we are trying to implement is that we are trying to implement some kind of a execution in a sequential order. So, let us say that we put a condition that first process P0 should execute, then only P1 should execute, then P0 should execute, then P1 should execute, meaning to say P0 is starting with the P0, P1 P0 should strictly alternate. So, if suppose such a synchronization is required, then let us see that. So, we know that what, until unless P0 has executed, P1 should not execute. So, if process P1 comes and wants to execute before P0 has executed, it should not be allowed. And the other condition is that if P0 has executed once and it wants to execute once again before P1 executes, then P0 also should not be allowed, meaning to say we should have a sequence which should be P0 followed by P1 followed by P0 followed by P1 and so on. So let us see that how this gets implemented. So if we start thinking that how do we make a solution, so the very first thing is that we should initialize the semaphore variable in such a way that the process P0, whenever it comes and it starts executing, it should be able to execute. So how do I initialize? So I would say that I am going to use, to control the execution of a process P0, I say that we are going to have a semaphore variable S, and to control the execution of a process P1, we saying that we will have another semaphore variable defined as a R. And since P0 has to execute once, so what we do, we can initialize S equals to 1 and we should initialize R equals to 0. Reason being that if R is initialized to 1, then process P1 comes and executes wait R and it will be able to go through. So we should initialize it to 0. So this is the logic which we use for S is initialized to 1 and R is initialized to 0. So now let us see that how both the processes are going to work. So the process P0 would check if it can go into the critical section by executing the wait S instruction. Once it executes the critical section, then it should signal the process P1 that it has done, it has executed. Now if it was waiting to get into a critical section, it can go and use the critical section. So how it can be done? It can be done simply with the help of a signal instruction. So now this process would come and execute the signal R, and when signal R is executed, the value of R is going to become equals to 1. Let us assume that till now the process has actually P1 process has not come. So the first P0 comes, it executes. So now the value of R becomes equals to 1 and value of S becomes equals to 0 because it was a wait S and it was decremented. Now the process P1 comes, it executes the wait R. When wait R is executed, we know that since value of R equals to 1, it will get decremented and become 0, which is a non-negative. So it will go into the critical section, and after doing the critical section, once again now it will say wait S. So now the value of S will become 1. Consequently, now the process P0 can execute once again. So we can see very clearly that how do we synchronize P0 P1 processes. Like we can create very complex synchronizations using semaphores. So let us once again summarize the semaphores. So we say that semaphore can be viewed as an integer variable on which 3 operations are defined: initialization, non-negative value, wait operation, which is a decrement the variable, and if the value is negative, then executing process is suspended or blocked. Signal operation increments the variable. If the value is not positive, then the process blocked by a wait operation is unblocked. In general, we find that there are 2 types of semaphores supported by operating systems. So one of them is known as a counting semaphore, where integer value can range over an unrestricted domain. That is, you can have minus n to plus n, and the another kind of a semaphore which is also supported by operating system is known as binary semaphore, where the value the semaphore variables can only acquire 2 values, binary values 0 and 1. We will see that how these semaphores they function, both that kind of semaphores, how they function, we will see. Let us look at a wait operation. We have simply said that wait is a decrement operation. Let us elaborate a bit. So here we are trying to indicate a wait as a function. So we assume semaphore to be a structure. In this context, when it is being written as a record, it is essentially meaning that semaphore is a structure, and this structure has two elements. The count is of type integer, and the another element q, which is a list where a set of processes can be the name of set of processes can be listed there in the queue. So this is a queue. So we can say that a semaphore is a structure which has a two component. One is a integer and another is a list of a queue which is nothing but a list of processes. So here we are trying to define that we are defining the function wait. So wait with the argument s, and we say that whenever this function is executed, see those of you who are more conversant with the C programming language, you should consider the begin and end as a opening brace and a closing brace, and this is quite same as a C construct where we have a function name and the argument. So this is a function body. So inside the function body, what happens that you do a s dot count, because s is a semaphore which has a structure which has a two elements, count and q. So you say s dot count equals to s dot count minus 1, it gets decremented, and after decrementing it checks that if s dot count is less than 0. If it is less than 0, then we place the process in s dot q and block this process, else we continue. So this is a wait operation, how this is how the wait operation performs. In similar way, we can see that the signal operation. So for a signal operation, we say that s dot count equals to s dot count plus 1, that is the increment, and we say that if s dot count is less than equal to 0, that is a negative, then it essentially means that there is a process. When the value of a s dot count is negative, it essentially means that there is a process which is actually blocked or suspended, which is waiting for the resource to become available. So we check if the value of a s dot equals to 0, then we remove a waiting process from a s dot q and place this process on the ready list. And once this process is placed on the ready list, this process as and when will get its chance will get executed. So this is how the signal operation works. So we should observe one fact, that if the value of a s dot count is greater than 0, which is possible, which is quite possible, that let us say that there is a program which only says that signal, that would mean that the value of a semaphore variable will become positive. Or if we have a multiple wait instruction, let us say s in the beginning is initialized to 0 and there are quite a few number of processes which come, s is initialized to 1 and there are 2 or 3 processes which come and say that wait. So we find that eventually the value of s could be minus 2. So what we are trying to say here is that if s dot count is greater than 0, this essentially means that the number of processes that can execute wait without blocking, how many processes can simultaneously access the critical section, that is what it essentially means. And if the value of s dot count is less than equal to 0, then magnitude of s dot count is indicative of number of processes which are actually waiting for that resource. So that was a way how counting semaphore worked. Let us try to look at that how the binary semaphores would work. So again, as in previous case, we had seen that semaphore was defined as a structure. Here we are defining a binary semaphore as a structure which has a value. Value can be either 0 or a 1, and it has a queue which will have a list of processes. So let us see that how it works. So to differentiate between a counting semaphore and binary semaphore, what we do, we give a different name to the weight function. Here we call it a weight B. It is just merely an indicative that it is for a binary semaphore, whereas when we write simple weight, it is indicative that it is meant for counting semaphore. So let us see that how the weight, what is the structure of what is the weight B function looks like. So this function essentially looks like it checks that if the value of S dot value is equal to 1, then what it does, it decrements. As we have seen that the weight operation is essentially a decrement operation. So if the value of binary semaphore variable value is 1, then it gets decremented to 0. Else, if suppose the value of semaphore variable is already 0, then we know that we cannot represent a minus 1. We are saying that it can only represent 0 and 1. So as a consequence, now since it is going to become negative, so what we are saying that you should block this particular process. So that is what is being done, that if the value you check if the value of semaphore variable value is equal to 1, then decrement the value to make it 0, else pick up the executing process and place in the S dot Q and block this particular process. In same way, we can see that signal B performs. So in case of a signal B, what it does, that it S dot Q is empty, then the value of value is made 1, else we just remove a process from a S dot Q and place this process in ready queue. So we have seen that how the counting and binary semaphore works. We will try to see few examples how the semaphores can be utilized for the purpose of implementing a mutual exclusion or solving some other kind of a problem, process synchronization problems. So let us first look at that how the mutual exclusion can be implemented. So one can see very clearly that initialize the semaphore variable to begin with equal to 1. So when a process comes, it executes, so the value S becomes equals to 0, and now if suppose at this juncture another process executes this function and says wait S, so we know that the value of S will become minus 1, and as per the wait instruction, the second process will go and get blocked. It will execute the critical section. After executing the critical section, it will execute a signal, and when it executes the signal, the value of S is going to get incremented. So now if there is any process which was blocked for this critical section, now that will be unblocked and that can start executing. Here in this example, I am trying to show a case where the deadlock can occur. So let us assume that we have two processes, process P0 and process P1, and there is a resource, there are two resources which are being guarded by say semaphore variable S and semaphore variable Q. So in the beginning, semaphore variable both are initialized to 1, S and Q both are initialized to 1. So let us assume that, let us first see the simple case, that let us assume that process P0 comes, so it executes the wait S, so the value gets decremented, since it is 1, so now the value of S will become 0, now it comes and executes a wait Q. Q was also 1, so it becomes 0, it is allowed further. So it can execute the critical section here, in this region it can execute its critical section, and finally after using the critical section it can release the resources. But now let us just try to, same case would be here, that if P1 comes, if P1 is, if second process is executing, then also we find that the things would work fine, that it will come and it will execute the wait Q. So Q will get decremented, it will become 0. Now it executes wait S and S will become 0. now it can come and execute the critical section at this point, and then after executing the critical section it can say signal Q and signal S. Once it has used, it can release signal. We should consider the signal as a sort of a mechanism of releasing the resources, that some resource which was getting blocked, and once the process has used the resource and it is done with its job, then it should release the resource. So signal is a mechanism to kind of releasing the resource. So we can see that individually each process, if they are executing, they would perform well. Now let us just try to see a scenario that a process P0 executes a wait S. So the value of S becomes 0. Now process P1 comes and process P0 executes wait S, and after that it gets suspended, and P1 comes and executes wait Q. Now after executing this, so when P1 executes now wait Q, the value of Q becomes again 0. So at this point of a time we can see that the value of S is 0 and a value of Q is 0. Now if suppose P1 it tries to execute wait S, the value of S is going to become -1. Consequently the P1 will go and get blocked, and let us say once this particular process gets blocked, now P0 gets its chance and it executes wait Q. Since the value of Q is already 0, now wait Q will make it -1. As a consequence, P1 also will go and get blocked. So now we find that P0 and P1 both are getting blocked. This is a kind of a scenario where one process is holding a resource and waiting for some other resource which is held by another process. So for an example, in this case we can say process P0 is holding a resource S and it is waiting for a resource Q, whereas process P1 is holding a resource Q and waiting for a resource S. So you find that this particular process P0 is thinking that at some point of a time Q will get released and it will get its chance, and P1 is thinking that if at some point of a time S will get released and it will get its chance, whereas we can very clearly see that that is never going to happen. So such a scenario we call as a deadlock scenario. Let us define another problem and try to see that how the solution for this problem can be obtained with the help of a semaphore. And in fact this is this particular problem is a very important problem from perspective of the operating system, and we call it as a producer consumer problem, and this is used day in day out in a variety of things. So let us first understand the problem in an abstract way and then try to see that how the solution is worked out and how it can be, where it can be applied, like what it is. So in this case we are saying that we can have one or more producers who are going to produce some kind of item, maybe item, and there is a single consumer which is consuming these items one by one, and the restriction is that a consumer cannot consume until unless producer has produced something, and the third constraint is that while producer is producing, consumer cannot consume, and while consumer is consuming, producer cannot produce. So it is something like the items are being produced and they are going to be kept in some kind of a tray, and we say that when producer produces, it keeps it in a tray. So when a producer is accessing a tray, at that point of a time consumer cannot access the tray, and in same way when the consumer is accessing the tray, at that time producer cannot access the tray to keep the produced item. So this is a restriction. and we are assuming that producer can produce as many items as it wants. Essentially, it is indicative of that the tray size is infinite. If we try to look at this kind of a thing in actual sense of computing, we find that the tray can be considered as something similar to the buffer, where we have an infinite buffer, where a producer is a function which is producing a data item which we are inserting into a buffer, and the consumer is a kind of a function which is picking up the data item from the buffer. So that is and this is very, very common in a computing system. So let us see that how a solution for a producer consumer can be obtained. We can very clearly see that the requirement of a producer consumer problem is in terms of a process synchronization and in terms of a mutual exclusion. So here in this example, we are trying to on a one side I have written a producer function, and on another side I have written a consumer function, and we are saying that we have a semaphore variables. There are two semaphore variables which we are going to use, n and s. So these are the two semaphore variables. So we should broadly start thinking that how the solution would look like. So what we are guarding here? We are guarding a tray in which producer will produce and consumer will consume from a tray. So we should have a one semaphore variable which will guard the tray. So in our case, what we are doing, we are using a s as a semaphore variable which is essentially meant for guarding the tray, and n is a semaphore variable which is going to be indicative that how many items a producer has produced. In the beginning, the number of items produced by the producer is how much? We can very clearly see that in the beginning, when producer has not started producing, the value of n is going to be 0. So it makes sense to initialize it to 0, and since the variable s is going to be used for guarding, so it can be initialized to 1. So now let us look at how the producer process is going to work. So producer comes and says produce. So some computation or something is carried out to produce that item. Having produced that item, now it is trying to access the tray where it will keep the item which it has produced. So what it does, and the tray is guarded by semaphore variable s. So it checks whether it is allowed. So it says wait s. Since if the producer is coming when the value of s is equal to 1, so now the value of s will get decremented, it will become 0, and as per the wait s definition, we can see that since the value is non-negative, it is allowed to go and execute the next instruction. So now here what it does, it appends, meaning to say it keeps the item on the tray, and if it is a array or if it is a buffer, there it appends the item which is produced. After appending, once the append operation is over, so we can see that producer has produced an item, it has successfully appended into the buffer. Now what it should do, it should release the buffer, and it should also tell the consumer that it has produced an item. So we find that signal s is meant for releasing the buffer, and signal n is meant for signaling the consumer that an item has been produced, meaning to say value of n at this juncture will become, if it was initially it was 0, now it will become 1. So if consumer do not consume and producer keeps producing, that at some point of a time value of n is going to be some k, which can be actually very large value. Whatever number of items which has been produced by producer will be the value of n. Now let us see that how the consumer works. So the consumer, as we said, that consumer cannot consume until unless an item has been produced. So what it should do? It should first check the value of n. If the value of n becomes negative, then it is very clear that the producer has not yet produced. So as soon as the consumer comes, the consumer does what? The very first thing it checks is, it checks that if there exists an item which has been produced by the producer. So it does a weight n. So if suppose there was an item produced, so value of n is equal to 1. So now what happens? That the value of n, when weight n is executed, gets decremented and it becomes 0. The weight would check if the value of n is negative. Since it is non-negative, it is allowed to execute the next instruction. And next instruction, we find that next is what? Next is that the consumer would try to access the tray. So for accessing the tray is guarded by semaphore variable s. So again you do a weight s, and if you pass through, then you take the item, consume it, and after that, after consuming, you would do a signal, you will release the tray. So this is how the whole thing is going to be functioning. So we can very clearly see that how the producer consumer problem can be implemented with the help of semaphores. Let us try to see two of the problems. We have seen that there are two processes, process P0 and a producer process and a consumer process. So let us try to analyze the two situations. The situation 1, where we are saying what happens if the signal S and signal N in a producer process is interchanged. So let us go back and see that what is it which we are referring. So we are referring these two instructions. So it is said that if suppose signal in this case we see that we have put signal S and then signal N. The question is that if instead of signal S it was signal N and signal S, will it make a difference? The answer is no, because what happens that the producer has accessed the tray. After accessing the tray, after appending, if it is executing a signal N, meaning to say it is enabling the consumer process a little early, whereas little early before releasing the tray. It is enabling the consumer process before releasing the tray. So what happens that if the consumer process comes and tries to access, it will become true on the item, but the buffer is yet not released, because the tray is yet not released, because signal S is yet not executed. So it will actually not matter if the value of a signal N and signal S is interchanged. Let us look at another problem which we had posed here, that is, we are saying what if weight N and weight S are interchanged? Then let us see that what would happen. So let us look at where we are and what we are referring to. So in the consumer process, we are saying that instead of writing a weight N first, we write a weight S first, and then these two instructions their positions are interchanged. So let us assume that there is a empty buffer, meaning to say there is no item produced, item has not been produced. So now when we do a weight S, now what happens that the S value will get decremented. Let us say consumer comes and executes. Let us assume that item has not been produced and a consumer comes first. So consumer comes and it will execute a weight S instruction, because the position of a weight S is weight S and weight N has been interchanged. So it will execute the weight S. Now the value of S will become 0, and it will execute a weight N, and since the value of N was equal to 0, now it will become -1 and it will go and get blocked. Now let us assume that after some period of a time the producer comes. Now producer will execute wait S. What was the value of a wait S? Value of S has become 0 because consumer has already decremented the value, because these two instructions were exchanged. First wait S was executed, decrementing the value of S equals to 0, and then wait N was executed, decrementing the value of N equals to -1. Now once again when wait S is getting executed, the value of S will become -1. So now this process will get blocked. So we can very clearly see that this process is blocked because value of N is negative, and this process is not able to enter inside to append. So what happened, that these two processes, they are in a deadlock condition. So we can very clearly see that these are very important. The order in which wait and signal instructions they would appear inside a solution are very, very important. They cannot be arbitrarily interchanged. One has to be really very careful about them. So in summary, if we try to say, we would say that semaphores provide us a primitive but very powerful tool for enforcing the mutual exclusion and process coordination, but it may be actually difficult to produce a correct program by using semaphore, primarily for the reason that a wait and signal operations are scattered throughout a program, and it becomes, at times it really becomes difficult to see the overall effect of these operations on a semaphore. So the previous example which we have seen is a kind of a example where we had said that we had an infinite buffer. What we are trying to do here is we are trying to give an example where we have a finite buffer, or we call it as a bounded buffer, meaning to say that the size of the number of items that can be produced is going to be some finite number equal to n. So let us see that how this solution works, and let us try to understand it. So we define there are 3 semaphore variables, F, E and S. As in earlier case also, we can very clearly, we should assume that S is a semaphore variable which is going to be used for guarding the tray, and then we have something known as a we would want to know, in case of a bounded buffer, the problem is that if the buffer is full, then producer cannot insert items into the buffer. So that would essentially mean that what producer has to do is, producer in the beginning has to come and check if the buffer is empty or there is a space where it can produce an item and keep. So that is one case, and you would require one more semaphore variable to check whether an item has been produced, because when the consumer wants to come and consumer wants to check that if the item has been produced, so there should be a semaphore variable. So we find that F is a semaphore variable, which is when the item is produced, it will be the F is the variable which is going to be used for, and E is the semaphore variable, something similar to saying empty. So if the buffer is empty, empty is a semaphore variable which is used for producer to check if the empty space is there, and F is the semaphore variable which can be considered as a similar to full. So so consumer process checks if the buffer is full, then it tries to consume. Buffer is so let us look at how the solution is going to be going to look like. So the producer comes. What it does, so let us see that in the beginning what is going to be there. The S is going to be initialized to 1, f is going to be initialized to 0 for the reason that in the beginning producer has not produced any item. So, buffer is empty, that is f is equal to full, and the number of items in the buffer can be n, that is the size of a buffer. So, E is initialized to n, that is the size, the maximum number which you can put inside, more than that is not possible. So, you would do a wait E. So, if suppose the buffer is completely, so what producer process does, producer begins by decrementing the value of a E, and consumer every time would consume a value, it will increment a value. So, essentially what happens that the producer, when it comes and produces, it consumes one space in the buffer. So, it decrements the value of a n, and consumer consumes an item freeing up a space. So, it increments the value of a n. So, let us look at how the solution looks like. So, producer begins with decrementation of a buffer value. So, if E was n in the beginning, there were n spaces available. Now, what it does, it reduces it by 1. Then it uses its semaphore guarding S as a guard variable, gets inside, appends the item and does the signal, and after appending, now it tells the consumer that it has produced an item by signaling to a semaphore variable f. See, let us look at how the consumer works. So, consumer first checks that if there is an item into a f by doing wait f, item into the buffer. So, it does a wait f. If the item exists and it is allowed to go further, then it will execute the wait s, which will allow it to take the item, and then after taking the item successfully, it will do a signal, and then since it has taken an item from the buffer, consumer has taken an item from the buffer, so it has created a space. So, what it does, it increments the value of E. So, now the available value becomes, it is incremented, and after that it consumes. So, this is how the producer consumer problem is implemented. We have seen actually the implementation for a bounded buffer and unbounded buffer. So, these are two classical problem of process synchronization, and this is one of the most widely used kind of synchronization construct. Quite often this kind of a construct is utilized in the system. I would just in the next few minutes, I would just want to describe a classical problem, classical process synchronization problem, and this problem actually what we do that it's a very important and a very interesting problem. Let us look at it. This particular problem we call it as a dining philosopher problem, and this is a classical this problem in a metaphorically it is something like what it says is there are 5 philosophers, and there is a round table, and on the round table there are 5 plates and 5 forks, and the thing is that these philosophers do only 2 things, either they philosophize or they eat. So, when they are thinking, they are not eating, and when they are eating, they are not thinking. So, philosopher is thinking, suddenly he will feel hungry, so he will start eating, and the condition is for him to be able to eat what he requires 2 forks. So, we can very clearly see in this this particular case, the problem is that if all the 5 philosophers they want to eat simultaneously, so let us assume that the philosopher number 1 picks up a 1 chopstick, then next one picks up this one picks up this one picks up this one picks up this. You find that each of them could be having a 1 chopstick, and they could be waiting for a other philosopher to release. This is a classic case in an operating system, because operating system is going to have a number of resources which are going to be a finite. It is not having a infinite resources, and because of this nature that the resources are finite, we find that the problem of a deadlock or problem of a starvation or a problem of a allocation etc. is required. Otherwise if the system had an infinite resource, then none of these problems would arise. So in this case, very clearly we can see that these philosophers will get deadlocked. So the idea is that we should have a solution which should allow them to be able to eat without causing any one of them to get deadlocked, or without causing any one of them to starve. So this is a challenging problem. There are quite a few solutions which are there, and my advice would be that you should look for various solutions. One of the solution which I am going to describe is a very simple solution, but that's not the ultimate solution which is going to be there. That is a simple solution which solves some of the problem. So here we are saying that each chopsticks are numbered. They are numbered. So what happens that what we are saying is that any philosopher would pick up its it will pick up its one of the fork followed by another fork. So we are saying that we can say that let us assume that we say that every philosopher first picks up the left hand side fork and then it picks up the right hand side fork. So we say that I equals to I plus 1. So I is 0 and I plus 1, that is this thing. So 0th philosopher picks up its own 0th fork, that is on its left side 0, and then it tries to pick up the right hand side fork. So this is how. So what we have done, we have considered this whole thing as a circular buffer. So that's the reason this kind of a thing is done. So we can see that chopstick I. So in this case, what we are doing, that we are saying that we have a chopstick as a semaphore variable which has a 5 element, and each of them in the beginning are initialized to 1, and then the process begins something like this. So what you do, you say await chopstick I, so chopstick 0, and then you say wait chopstick I plus 1, I plus 1 modulo 5. So 1 modulo 5 will give me 5, 1 modulo 5 will give me 1. So I decrement that particular, I use that. So I get a chopstick which is a chopstick number 0 and chopstick number 1, provided the other philosopher has not already picked up the I plus 1th, because let us see that how the whole thing functions. So if I call this philosopher as a philosopher number 0, so I am saying this is a chopstick 0 and this is a chopstick 1 and this is a philosopher 1. So when the philosopher 1 looks, philosopher 1 has already picked up. So the protocol which we are saying is that is something like this, that you first pick up your left hand side and then go and follow your right hand, get your right hand side right hand side chopstick. So in this particular example we can see that there is going to be some kind of it is always possible that it could lead to a deadlock. So we would need to find out some kind of a solution which will be a deadlock free solution. Thank you.